So I'm seeing people all over Twitter say, oh my God, update Chrome right away. I can't for the life of me figure out how to update Chrome. So
about Google Chrome?
About?
Yeah, that's always where it is.
Updating.
Well, mine's up to date already. I'm on the beta channel, though. Why? What's going on the regular channel?
What's the issue?
I haven't bothered to look yet. Everyone's saying update now.
Maybe they're just finally getting the new ugly tabs.
I don't know.
That I've had for like 3 months now.
What happens if your Chrome //help is spinning? Doesn't want to load. That seems not good.
You go to the task manager window that Chrome has.
Oh God.
I just don't know how people tolerate Chrome. It's so.
I like Chrome.
Oh God! How can you be such like a Mac person? Seriously,
Marco,
it's not. I'm not going to say it's Mac-like.
You won't even own an Xbox because Microsoft makes it.
Microsoft doesn't make Chrome.
No, seriously, Marco, I could not agree with you more. I am right there with you, dude.
You might as well be using Windows. Chrome is so bad.
It's not Mac-like, but it is a good web browser. It is not a Mac-like web browser, but it is a good web browser. And its DevTools are still better than Safari's.
That you're probably right about. I can't really say, but if you're not a web developer, I don't understand why you would use Chrome for anything besides. I guess I use it for Google Docs. That's about it. And it's I don't like it. It's so wrong. Everything it does on the Mac is just so wrong. It just behaves horribly. Nothing is where it should be. Not to mention all the battery life issues on laptops and stuff. It's just bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't use it on a laptop if I.
Oh, it is so rough. Because
I do use it on a laptop all day, but my laptop is plugged in all day. But battery life, forget it. It's brutal. But no, it loads all my web pages, and sometimes Safari doesn't. It's like the unreliable keyboard. I just need you to always load web pages. Sometimes Safari decides that it's not going to do that anymore, and it makes me angry. I run both web browsers all day long. I'm always running both. I'm never just running one. So it's not like I'm picking favorites, but I like Chrome.
I could not agree with you more, Marco. Chrome is so... I am not one of those people that's super angry about things being not Mac-like. Slack is a shit show, and Chrome is probably second place for that. It just...
Chrome is worse than Slack.
Yeah, I agree, actually.
It is less Mac-like than Slack.
Well, and because Chrome, you have alternatives. Slack, it's if you have to run Slack, you probably have to run it because of a decision other people have made that you need to interact with. So it's fine. You run it, you deal with it, it's no big deal. Whereas with Chrome, that's less defensible. You can just run Safari, and chances are everything you need to do probably works in Safari. So why would you not run Safari? Why are you running Chrome? Oh God, it's so bad.
Oh, I gave you a reason because of those web browsers. So looking at this tweet just in one of our channels, also seriously update your Chrome installs. It sounds like a security thing. There's some kind of security flaw in existing Chrome.
Yeah, that's why I tried to figure out how to update Chrome for a good 2 or 3 minutes before giving up and asking you guys.
The About box.
Of course, why is it every other? So I first I checked the Chrome menu for a check for updates thing. Then I went over to the help menu because sometimes things put it in the help menu. Then I went to preferences, which of course is not a real preference window. It's just this crazy URL that opens up the preferences in the browser. And I'm scrolling through all these things that make no sense. And then it's well, it's not here. I click on advanced, and it's nowhere in any of those either. For God's sakes, where the hell do you update this app? I would never have thought to go to the About box.
I would have done the exact same steps.
You just got to know that.
Whoever goes to the About box of anything?
So Chrome is so aggressive about updates, though. There should be an icon in your toolbar that's a colored arrow, whether it's green or yellow if you've been waiting a while. Chrome totally wants to update itself, and will update itself whether you ask it to or not. But if you need to do it in a hurry, either quit and relaunch, which I think will also do it, or the About thing.
Well, but you can't even quit it anymore. You got to hold down the quit button.
The About, they don't even have an About window either, by the way, just in case you think they're actually going to pop up a dialog.
No, of course not. It's everything about Chrome is just a giant middle finger to the Mac. But I like the Mac, so it's like a giant middle finger to me.
I hear you. I really do. All right, let's start with some follow-up. A lot of the internet wanted to write in and tell us in generally very gentle ways that we are all idiots, and there is a fix for the springboard rearrangement woes that John was talking about last episode. So if you didn't hear last episode or would like a brief recap, John was lamenting in the way that only John can, and I mean that in the best possible way, that it is nigh impossible to rearrange things using Springboard, using the home screen on Apple devices these days. It is just an exercise in frustration from top to bottom. And I was quietly and silently cheering along with John as he made this entire rant because I could not have agreed more. However, I forgot, and I bet John also knew this, and also forgot that there is a pro-level maneuver to fix this problem. John, can you tell us about this?
I did not forget, but the suggestion that many people think is a better way. Some people said easier, some people said less error prone, some people, whatever. But there is another way to rearrange things, which is to use two hands. And you may be asking yourself, if you think like me, adding a second hand to the surface of the screen does not make this operation any simpler. But their theory is, okay, it's more complicated, but it's less error prone because, yes, you have to put two hands on the surface of your thing, or at least be very dexterous with your one hand and have one finger holding the icon and another finger swiping across or whatever. But the advantage you get is that you don't have to hit the edge of the screen, which is true. But now, like, you're still hovering over, you're still the icon or icons, you can do multiple that you're holding. You're still hovering over the screens as you swipe past them. And unlike the edge thing, you're not guaranteed that you will advance to the next screen at the fastest possible rate because you have to swipe a second time. So that gives you even more time to perturb the icons on the screens that you're passing through. And I think a multi-handed, multi-finger gesture actually is more difficult and more likely to screw you up, especially if you foolishly grab multiple icons, because then when you accidentally drop those somewhere, it's all over. So I don't think this actually makes things any easier. Yes, it is an alternate way you can do it. It works a little bit better on the iPad where you have a chance of perhaps it's sitting on a table or you have more space to put two hands or whatever, but it doesn't change the fundamental problem, which is that there's no undo and it's very easy to accidentally mess up things that you didn't want to mess up. And then even when you get to where you want to go, there is a very small, ill-defined safe area where you can actually hover where it won't cause something you don't want to happen.
To me, like the multi-finger drag and drop thing has the similar kind of value proposition and also downsides in practice as the rest of the iOS drag and drop system that was introduced in, what was it, iOS 11? It adds a bunch of delays to things that used to not have delays, like tapping to get a menu in Safari or things like that. Or, it accidentally starts a drag when you might not want to start a drag. See also Force Touch, which has similar problems. But it brought the great advance of being able to hold down something with one finger and use you don't have to use a second hand, but you can use a second finger to like scroll a view or to navigate the interface such that you can drop the thing with the first finger somewhere else in the interface. And it's great that they added that to Springboard, but it has the same problem that has everywhere, which is that not only is it a big delay to get into that mode, and it's very error prone to enter the mode or to not enter it, depending on what you want to do, but once you're in the mode, it's also very error prone to move around with the second finger, because a lot of times what you do with the second finger when you think you're going to swipe or scroll, you actually end up picking up a second item. And if that's what you wanted to do, great. But the problem with this whole system is that it's kind of unreliable and, as John said, very error prone. So in practice, I've known about the second finger trick since iOS 11 or whatever it was released, and I've been using it, but I would say I fail, and it does something I don't want it to do probably at least half the time that I'm actually trying to use it. And I have the exact same error rate with drag and drop on the iPad as well, and the exact same error rate with reordering things in Overcast. Like I had my own drag handles before, and then when this system came in, not only did I want to implement the new system, but it also broke my hack that gave me drag handles before. So I figured I was kind of forced to implement the new system. And it's just like the rest of drag and drop on iOS. Like I find it very error prone. And when it works, it's great. Like when you can pick up one or two things and then scroll with another finger, and that's great. But in practice, it's very error prone and does something I don't want it to do a lot of the time.
Yeah, I'd completely forgotten about it. And it's funny, this is a tangent, but as I've been using my iPad Pro more and more, I do really, really like it. but it's apparent to me, even as I've adjusted a lot of my workflows is overkill for what I'm describing, but like my process for doing things, it occurred to me just in the last month or so when I was trying to like send a link to somebody, but I didn't have messages open or something like that, or maybe it was an image. I don't remember exactly what I was doing, but I can, wait, I can tap and hold and that'll start a drag operation. And then with my other hand, sound familiar, I can swipe up to get the dock and open messages and then not really flick, but kind of, drag the other thing that I picked up over to messages, drop it there and be good, which is actually really, really nice and fairly intuitive once I thought about what I needed to do. But because I grew up with I shouldn't say an actual computer. Oh my God, please don't email me. But because I grew up with a traditional, oh God, because I grew up with a traditional computer, it's just very foreign to the way I think. And I'm trying to get better about embracing the touch way of life. And I am getting better about it, but it's definitely a slow journey for me that has taken longer than I expected.
So getting used to stuff like that, like this, part of it is just, like you said, what you grew up with and what you are accustomed to. But there is another aspect of it. You can actually measure people's performance with different operations, and certain things are more friendly to the way people work than others. So to give an example with like the original Mac and using a mouse, this comes up a lot when someone digs up some old computer stuff, maybe in my attic, maybe on eBay. The original Mac came with a guided tour. It was a floppy disk that was a guided tour, but it also came with an audio cassette that you would play while the floppy disk was in, because you can't fit that much audio on a floppy disk. That would be madness. And one of the first things they taught you on the guided tour was how to use the mouse. And they had a little animation, and they showed when you move it on the horizontal surface of your desk, the cursor moves to match it. And they had a little graphic that was showing that, and the voice is explaining it to you, because you had to explain to people how to use the mouse. But touch is a much more direct interface where it's like, well, if there's something that looks like a button on the screen, and we say hit the button, and you just shove your finger in. We all see with our toddlers how quickly you don't really have to be taught that much about that. Once you realize I can just put my meaty paws on the screen, I can do something. That's an example of improving an interface. Before, there was a indirection, however slight it might be and however easy it was for people to overcome it, but it was still an indirection. Getting rid of that is better. But the same token, all these things we just described with rearranging icons and starting drag operations and holding your finger down and using another finger to swipe through, that's never going to get more friendly than it is. Like, that is inherently an awkward, error-prone thing to do. And there's no amount of culture or getting used to things that's going to make that a more friendly interface than alternatives that don't require that kind of both mental and physical gymnastics. It's just a more difficult things for people to do. It's not impossible. You can do it. Toddlers can learn how to do it as well. Like, you see a 2-year-old doing the same operation. But all things being equal, compare that to an operation where you get to split the task up into pieces. First, set the icon aside. Next, find the destination, then put the thing in. It's less error prone. It may actually be mentally, there may be more cognitive load to do the multi-step process because you have to sort of understand what you're going to do. But if you were to test people, for their error rates or whatever, you'd see that it's more error prone to do the thing, especially if you tested a wide swath of humanity. And this is a thing that Apple used to do back in the day that they stopped doing around about when Steve Jobs came back, which is, you don't have to just have your intuition and gut about what is better for usability. You can test this. You can use science to determine, given a wide swath of people of varying ages and abilities, whatever thing we're trying to make happen here, we want people to be successful. We want them to be few errors. We want them to feel less frustrated. We want them to be able to accomplish a task at a small amount of time. We want them to remember how to do a task across a long period of time. Like, you can pick what your goals are, and then you can test your interfaces against those goals and find out how miserably you're doing on them and compare multiple approaches. Bruce Tognazini, if I'm pronouncing his name right, has asktog.com or something. He's got a website. You can go through all the old tests they did to come up with the Mac interface. How many buttons should a mouse have? How should the menus work? All that stuff, which it doesn't mean like once you test it once, that's it forever and ever, because things get refined over time and we come up with improvements. But you don't just have to guess about these things. But Apple today tends not to do that much of that type of formal research. More, if you read about Ken Koshenda's book where they're like doing that, but in an informal way, like amongst other engineers in the hallway, hey, I tried this and here's how it felt or whatever, which is better than nothing. Like if you read a lot of usability books, especially about web usability, they'll say like, it doesn't take much to get a, 60 to 70% of the value of usability testing. You don't need this big complicated usability lab and a big one-way mirror and cameras on people's faces and, pulse monitors. You can just, informal testing with your coworkers is much better than no testing. But I would say, there's still a place for that sort of actual scientific testing to come up with something better. Because right now, the reason we have all these weird interfaces in iOS is because there's nothing obvious better. Like if you want this capability, if you want to be able to do all these things, it's cool that you can do them. It's awkward, but it's not obvious how you would be able to do those same things with less awkwardness and fewer errors, other than the things I just suggested, which is like, a shelf to put things on, or I'm going to use case here, using an interface on a different computer, on a personal computer. If you could use a mouse and a keyboard and a much larger screen, I could rearrange Springboard, and some holding areas and stuff, and a trial commit interface. It would be much easier to rearrange Springboard. Even iTunes was better, I think, but even that could be improved upon. So I look forward to rearranging the Springboard on our Apple glasses in 2035 being a much simpler, less error-prone experience.
Oh, God. All right. Speaking of simple and error-prone, Apple supplier Corning is working on flexible glass for foldable displays. There's a post on The Verge where this is discussed. Apparently, their CEO, I don't know, someone from Corning, the CEO or R&D person, whatever, has said, yeah, we're working on this foldable glass thing. And they have a very fascinating GIF that they have provided that is at the top of the page that I could watch all day. And there isn't too much to say here, I don't think, other than this is, I guess, a subtle hint that Apple, who uses Corning and their Gorilla Glass for iPhone displays, Apple could hypothetically use this forthcoming glass that they say is coming in the next couple of years for a foldable display if they so choose. So that's good news if you're into it.
That's definitely an Apple style thing to do because, like I said last show, plastic, no matter how good that plastic is, if you're constantly going to bend it, plastic is not known for its ability to be bent back and forth many, many times and not show any signs of wear. Same thing, plastic is not known for its ability to resist scratches. Like it's just generally a softer material than glass or metal or all these other things. So there's kind of, there are many reasons that Apple settled on aluminum and glass for basically all of its products. They have the properties that make the products pleasant to use and stand up to wear and tear. Plastic less so. The original iPhone almost had a plastic display, but they dodged that bullet at the last minute. The iPod Nano did have plastic over its display, and that was very bad. So here's hoping Apple can figure out the bendy glass, because that would be a hell of a way to enter the bendables market. Is that a thing? We got wearables and then bendables.
Foldables is what you're looking for. Isn't that what Mike and Jason?
Bendables. It's like phones that fold in half, bendy straws. What else is in that market?
iPhone 6 Pluses.
Ooh.
Yeah, I guess. Folding chairs.
Yeah, I would love to see if bendable glass can actually be a thing. I mean, I am no expert in materials. That sounds impossible to me.
Transparent aluminum.
But yeah,
Would that be worth something to you?
If it can be done, that sounds great, because I think it is a critical problem. If folding phones are going to take off, we are going to have to get over this issue of right now all we know how to make the front of the screens out of is plastic, and plastic kind of sucks as screen material. Like, it works, it's fine, but if we can have glass, we'd rather have glass, and it makes a pretty big difference in niceness if we can have glass. So that would be great. But I mean, I'll believe it when I see it, I guess.
Computer.
What was that, Star Trek 4?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Marco hasn't seen it.
That Star Trek should not have worked, and now I'm going to get everyone emailing me about how it didn't work, but I loved that one. I thought it was hilarious.
Everybody loved that one.
Really? Oh, I assumed it was just me.
It's universally beloved.
But it shouldn't be. It's terrible.
It's a good movie that makes people happy.
It is a good movie that makes people happy, but can you just concede that if you look at the description of, all these future people are going to come back in time to get some whales, like, come on.
It's fish out of water. It's beloved characters coming back to Earth. And we get to see the crew that we know and love being in a fish out of water type scenario, and it's fun.
I agree with you. It's just if you were to look at it only on paper, I maintain that it should not have worked, even though it did.
Bats aren't bugs and whales aren't fish.
Anyway, all right, moving on. We have more riveting USB naming related news. And this actually is kind of cool. Apparently USB 4 has been kind of announced in a way, and that is that Thunderbolt 3 is not patent encumbered isn't what I'm looking for, is it? It is the specification has been made royalty free. There you go. And Intel has given the spec to the USB Implementers Forum, which are the people that decide how USB works. And so Thunderbolt 3 will eventually be called USB 4. And that's actually really cool because that theoretically paves the way for what we know as Thunderbolt today to be more universal and not require maybe a Intel CPU. Hint, hint, Apple, hint, hint.
Yeah, this is a smorgasbord of USB Thunderbolt and naming stuff. So first, the sort of the royalty free nature, we've covered that before. That's been a while coming. I guess this is the one of the most prominent fruits of that labor. Second is that Intel is building Thunderbolt and the new USB into its CPUs, so that will make both much easier to implement. You don't have to have a separate chip for it. If you get an Intel CPU, it's got it built in. It being open, anybody else could do the same thing. Hint, hint, Apple could make ARM CPUs and build in Thunderbolt. And then you have the USB 4 spec being a superset of Thunderbolt 3 and all the USB 3.2 stuff, which makes sense. USB 4 is not here yet. USB 3.2 is like this year. USB 4 is like out next year somewhere. And then finally, just to add a little bit more ridiculous naming, all the other versions of USB were like USB space 2.0, USB space 1.1, but USB 4 removes the space between the B and the number. So it's USB 4 because it has to be different.
Everything they do is like it's so close to good, and then they do something to make it either bad or confusing or both.
They're going to run out of variations. What do they do for 5? Oh, Roman numerals. They haven't done Roman numerals yet. So USB V. Can't wait.
There you go.
I have to keep saying it's pronounced 5.
Oh, God. I'm not looking forward to that. No, this is very cool, though. I am really enthusiastic about Apple being able to use Thunderbolt 3 / USB 4 on their forthcoming ARM computers. Am I right?
Yeah, and Thunderbolt 4, I think we talked about that before, but Thunderbolt 4 is also a thing. So I don't know if that has to be in a separate chip, but seeing Thunderbolt built in to CPUs and subsumed into USB means that it is much more likely to be a part of everyone's future than it was before.
Moving on, we had talked last episode, I think it was an askatp, about, hey, how do I know what my 32-bit apps are on my iPad? So if I upgrade this or update the software, what am I going to lose? And we weren't entirely sure how to do this, but unsurprisingly, there's a post at iMore that describes exactly what to do, which apparently is settings, general, about applications. And then in there, it'll show you an app compatibility screen that will tell you which apps are no longer going to be compatible in the future.
Everything's in settings somewhere.
And that's why they have search.
But the search doesn't work. The search never works.
Yeah, exactly.
I've had the search work, I think, one time out of the probably at least 5 or 6 times I have tried to use it to find something. I don't know how they possibly implemented the search and settings to make it so bad at finding things that like I'm typing the exact name of. Does it work for anybody?
It works okay for me.
It's kind of like those search. It reminds me of the search and system preferences on the Mac. Remember when they added that? And that
actually works.
Right, but it's hand tuned. Like they added I think attached metadata. Like you could type wallpaper, which is not a word that Apple uses to describe the desktop background, but it would find that preference pane because they put a bunch of synonyms in. But in iOS, like either it's not hand curated like that, or they didn't do a very good job of attaching metadata, because you'll type a word that is a reasonable synonym for what you're looking for and it won't find it. And as you pointed out, sometimes you'll type in a word that you think is an exact match and it still won't find it. So I'm not sure what data it is searching across, but it's certainly not searching. It's certainly not doing a full text search of all text that appears on the screen in settings screens.
No, like you can type literally a word that is in the title, and the thing you're looking for will not show up. Like it isn't even like a failure of synonym search or a failure of a spell check or anything like that. Like it's literally not indexing the words that show up on screen.
I feel like it doesn't go very deep. Like I remember I was looking for something that was like 3 or 4 screens deep, and it could never find it. And maybe it just does like the first 2 layers or something. I don't know. Anyway, once you have a search in your UI, it's probably a sign that something is amiss. I'm still not entirely convinced that the idea that your settings are in a settings application rather than within the apps themselves is long-term the way to go, because settings just gets tremendous, and it's not like we haven't figured out ways to put screens for configuring your applications within your application, and most apps do it anyway, so it's weird.
Indeed. Cirilla writes that Microsoft already has Xbox Game Pass, which is a quote-unquote Netflix for games service with millions of subscribers. I had no idea this existed, but I also have not owned an Xbox since the original Xbox way back when.
What I was getting at in the last show, which is not very well communicated, was the how different the phone game market is than console games. Like PlayStation has something similar where you subscribe to PlayStation Plus and you get like a bunch of free games each month. It's not the same thing as like a subscription service, but it is it is a subscription service, but you don't get access to a ton of games. You get like 1 or 2 handpicked free games a month or whatever. But both of those things, both Xbox and PlayStation have a large game library of $60 games, of $15 to $60 games that people want to play, each of which is significant and worthwhile, kind of like Netflix with a whole bunch of movies, whereas Apple has a collection of literally hundreds of thousands of mostly very bad games that most people don't want to play, and a small collection of good games that are already either selling well or getting people to download for free and then selling them in-game stuff. And I'm not sure your typical iOS gamer feels like they would derive enough value from any reasonable subscription, because most people I see playing games on their phones don't go through enough games to make the subscription work at it. Like because iOS games are so cheap or free, if the subscription was $5 a month, they'd be like, why don't I just spend that $5 on games? Like I spend $1.50 on games a month, and you want me to subscribe, I guess I would have access to way more games, but history has shown that I only play 3 free games and 1 99-cent game and 1, 50-cent in-app purchase per month on average. So it's harder to come out ahead versus $60 Xbox games, where if I can get access to a huge library of $60 Xbox games, it's easy to see how that math work out if you have enough time to play games. I don't know. It remains to be seen. There could be some untapped market for people who want access to 100,000 games, of which they're going to play 2, but we'll see.
And this, to me, this is just one more argument for why it makes way more sense to have this as part of a bundle than to try to sell it as a standalone service. Because I see why it makes sense on game consoles. Even then, it isn't for everybody, but I see why it makes sense for some people on game consoles. But yeah, everything you said was correct about the iOS market. It's just so different for games that I don't see people wanting to pay separately for this. But if it was part of a bundle, they would think aspirationally, that's great, I would use that. Even if they don't end up actually using it for much, it would add to the perceived value of the bundle, and it would help people justify purchasing the bundle if it includes games and stuff, and just all sorts of things that they may or may not actually use in practice. Whereas if you try to sell it separately, there's going to be a lot more scrutiny on that purchase. And even after they subscribe, for the people who do, if they aren't really playing the games, they'll be way more likely to cancel that pretty soon. Whereas if it's part of a bundle, they aren't going to be scrutinizing every single part of that bundle every month to say, am I still really using this or not? So again, it's ever more reasons why I think and hope this is all going to be one big bundle rather than individual services.
And interestingly, I think they can basically give away access to tons of games without being afraid that they're going to end up paying out a huge amount of that subscription fee to the developers, because most games are free, and I can't imagine in-app purchases being part of the subscription, because that's the way they make all their money.
Yeah,
So You can get the games for free, but the games are probably free already anyway. Maybe it'll open up a slightly larger market for 99-cent games than exists now. But yeah, once all the popular games are free, and then they get in there and you buy whatever thing they're making you buy in the game, and that Apple can't allow that to be part of your $5 subscription because everyone would subscribe just so they could play Candy Crush without whatever limitations they put in your way. Just unlimited in-app purchase, go. Like it breaks the whole model that they've corner they painted themselves into. It's not a thermal corner. What's a word other than thermal? It's a casino corner. I don't know. Like the game market on iOS is so strangely shaped from a historical perspective, and it's fine that it works for Apple and people enjoy it, but I'm not sure how. Like you could throw a subscription into there, and it's almost like like Margaret was getting at, like it seems valuable from the outside, but in reality, it's pointless because no money really changes hands, and it just makes you feel better about a bill you're already going to pay anyway.
We are sponsored this week by Hover. Visit hover.com/ATP to learn more and get 10% off your first purchase. Get a domain name for whatever you're passionate about at Hover. Building your online brand is so important. You can show the world who you are and what you're passionate about without tying it to a particular company's publishing platform or whatever social network is popular this year, because that stuff changes quickly. And you can do this by having your own domain name. Nowadays, it feels like everyone has domain names, so it's important that yours stands out. Hover lets you register over 400 different domain extensions. They have all that to choose from to help you brand yourself online. And there's one that's really great lately. It is called .me. You can get whatever it is you want, .me. This is a unique extension to use for your portfolio to showcase who you are and what you do. So if you have a portfolio website ready to launch, get the .me extension or lots of other domain extensions they have available at Hover. Hover is a great registrar for domains. I use them myself all the time. They have great practices that really respect you, and they have really good deals too. So there's no tricks, there's no shady upsells, no scammy add-ons. Their domains come with free WHOIS privacy because that's just the right thing to do. They have super easy setup and a wonderful control panel. It makes things very, very easy to do, including a feature called Hover Connect. With a few simple clicks, you can set up very popular web hosts, and their customer support is top-notch if you ever need it, although honestly, it's so easy to use, I don't think you will need it. But it's incredible customer support if you ever do. So when you're ready to buy your next domain name, and if you don't have one yet, you really should. Go to hover.com/ATP. You can learn more there, and you can get 10% off your first purchase. Hover. Get a domain name for whatever you're passionate about.
I don't really know what this next topic is about. So what we're going to talk about is Apple and NVIDIA. And I know enough to know that NVIDIA and Apple used to be chummy, and now they're not. And because I am not someone who really cares about 3D cards and in fancy graphics cards and things of that nature, I've never really spent the time to really dive in and understand the history here. But luckily, I have a John Siracusa that can tell me all about it. So, John, what's going on here?
As we approach Mac Pro Day, which could be today, could be the day you're listening to this. Anyway,
probably not, but it could.
It's time to revisit this. Especially in light of semi-recent development. So we talked about NVIDIA and Apple in the past, and particularly NVIDIA's place in the 3D market. They have had the best, fastest cards for gaming for a long time. The lead used to swap between NVIDIA and ATI, AMD, and whoever else every once in a while, but we've been in a long phase where NVIDIA is in the lead. They're also have the most mind share and market share in AI applications with their CUDA language. And for a long time, Apple has not been including NVIDIA GPUs in any of its products. That's not that big of a deal if the Apple doesn't make any kind of computers that are focused on gaming or really GPU intensive AI, Pro 3D, machine learning, yada, yada, yada stuff. But in theory, the Mac Pro could be targeted at some of those markets. And so it's an open question. Hey, this Mac Pro, Apple's going to learn from all its past mistakes. Is NVIDIA going to be an option on the new Mac Pro, either from Apple or separately. Like if you could buy one, but then you could upgrade the card if the thing is indeed upgradable. And on that front, you're like, well, if they make it any kind of computer with replaceable cards, Apple doesn't need to participate in that. They can ship it with an ATI card, AMD card. I keep calling it ATI, whatever. Same company now. They can ship it with an ATI card. But if it gets old or if you don't like it, you can buy an NVIDIA card and swap it in, and you'll be fine. The wrinkle there is you need drivers for it. And NVIDIA, in recent months and years, has been very willing to write drivers for macOS, but they've hit a snag. And the snag is that in the latest version of macOS, I forget when they did this, they've been locking down kernel extensions for a long time in macOS. And the current iteration, basically, and this is a quote from NVIDIA in one of their support forums, Apple fully controls drivers for macOS. Unfortunately, NVIDIA currently cannot release a driver unless it is approved by Apple. That's not strictly true. You could tell people to boot with a NVRAM ARG that disables the system protection and loads unsigned kernel extensions, blah, blah, blah. I think they could get around it in that way, but that's not something people want to do, and it's not really feasible for a consumer product. But what they're complaining about is that you have to be like a licensed developer and you have to sign your kernel extension. Apple has to co-sign it essentially to say, yep, we're okay with this kernel extension shipping. And for whatever reason, political, technical, bureaucratic, apparently NVIDIA can't get drivers for its latest GPUs to go through the process that's required to get them to load on Mojave Macs. And so this is upsetting for people because they're like, I can't even just buy, I can't do it on a Hackintosh. I can't take my old Mac Pro and put in one of the new cards because there are no drivers for it. And, the Mac Pro is a chance for Apple to fix all of its mistakes and to make a great new computer. It's not the end of the world if they continue to have this vendetta against NVIDIA and say, we are just never going to deal with them. But it is kind of a problem for Apple that NVIDIA is the leader in so many different markets and continues to have the best cards, quote unquote, best cards for many different purposes. And Apple apparently not only refuses to ship things in there, but refuses to even let NVIDIA do all the work itself and ship things that can work with Macs. I hope that's not true. I hope something else is going on. And maybe behind the scenes, they're working with NVIDIA and these things will come out with NVIDIA cards and it'll be great. Another possibility is that, ATI takes the lead again. They just released a new card. I think they were the first to market with a 7-nanometer GPU. They're, the new architecture, new process. It's impressive, but they did not take the lead. Like this new card they came out with, it's on a smaller process than NVIDIA is currently shipping at, just barely matched an existing year-old NVIDIA card. So ATI has not regained the performance lead. I think this is actually a little bit of a problem. Obviously, some of the stuff NVIDIA does competes with Apple and its Metal initiatives, and maybe this is all moot if Apple starts making its own GPU, so who the hell cares about NVIDIA and ATI? But in the world we live in today, a Mac Pro produced by a company that refuses to have anything to do with NVIDIA and also refuses to let NVIDIA ship anything that can work inside a Mac Pro is slightly lesser for it, and I really hope that's not how things turn out. And so this is, of the many things that we'll all be watching for on Mac Pro Day, one of them is, does it ship with an NVIDIA card? And the second one is, can someone put an NVIDIA card into it, a good modern NVIDIA card into it after the fact and have it work?
We've heard various rumblings and rumors and things from alleged employees for years now about how there's this massive bad blood between Apple and NVIDIA, and lots of reasons for it. The main reason I heard stemmed from back a few generations ago. NVIDIA had those GPUs and MacBook Pros that died a lot and caused a lot of expensive repairs for Apple. And basically Apple blamed NVIDIA blamed Apple, and Apple had to eat the bill for all that and kind of shunned NVIDIA from all their products since. And so if that is indeed the reason why we haven't seen a lot of NVIDIA stuff from Apple in the last few years, I think that's a dumb reason. Like, if there is bad blood between these companies and it is within Apple's power to fix it, I think they should fix it. Because, as you said, like there's pretty strong demand from high-end GPU users for NVIDIA support. By continuing to not offer NVIDIA GPUs, I think Apple is hurting itself and its customers more than whatever any dispute is worth.
Yeah, and the interesting part is like it's not even that Apple has to ship NVIDIA cards. They just need to not prevent their customers from using NVIDIA cards, and that's a like they've talked about how they're changing their attitude about the Mac Pro and they're going to make the computer that pros want. But part of it is like Apple's stance. The idea that Apple would sell you a computer knowing that the people who buy it are going to change it after they get it, whether that's upgrades or even just component swaps, like that mindset, which Apple used to have, that they would sell you a computer with the expectation that whether it's you're going to buy third-party RAM or you're going to buy a hard drive from someone else and slap it in there, or you're going to buy a second GPU and put it in, or you're going to replace the GPU that it comes with a different one, selling you essentially a platform, a modifiable platform. Obviously, that's not appropriate for laptops, for your iPhone, for a Mac Mini even, right? But the whole point of the Mac Pro is to be different from those other computers. It's different than an iMac Pro. Different how? Because they sell it to you and it's got card slots or expansion or whatever. Like, I don't know if they're going to go that far. Maybe they're like, oh yeah, it's expandable, but it's only expandable with Apple widgets, right? So, you have to buy components from Apple and stick them in there. And if Apple doesn't sell it, tough luck, right? But I feel like that's leaving money on the table. If they really want to be serious in the pro market, part of what makes something pro is the idea that you can buy sort of the chassis and the guts and be able to upgrade components as you go along, right? That's what you're paying all this money for, to have an upgradable, reliable, sturdy core computer that you can augment and build just the machine that you need for whatever you're doing. And again, that doesn't require Apple to deal with NVIDIA at all. All it requires is them to allow NVIDIA to do what it apparently wants to do, which is sell cards to Mac users and write the drivers itself. And then it's between those customers and NVIDIA. If the drivers suck, then, it's like anything else. People used to sell like RAID cards and, their own video cards and their own, USB cards for Macs that had an older version of USB. Like, that's part of what has historically made a Mac Pro is the ability to do things like that. So this situation where apparently NVIDIA can't even get its drivers to work on Mojave because of signing things, I really hope is some kind of misunderstanding. And on the bad blood front, the only company I can think of that Apple's had worse bad blood with, if that makes sense, than NVIDIA is Qualcomm. And Apple's solution to that is they're going to make their own freaking modems. Like, short-term solution is we're going to have Intel do them. And long-term is we're going to make them ourselves. Which, fine, if Apple's short-term solution is we're going to use AMD ATI GPUs and all our stuff, and our long-term is I'll make our own GPUs, fine, then do that. But right now, we don't know that that's the plan. Right now, we just see Apple about to release a Mac Pro that before it's even released, the smart money is that it will not have GPU performance that is competitive with the best GPUs offered in PCs.
Yeah, it just seems so obvious to me that this is, as you guys said, this is a problem that from what we can tell, Apple needs to fix. And being stubborn and petulant doesn't seem to do anyone a service. It doesn't help the users. It doesn't help Apple. It doesn't really help anyone. And I feel like my perception of Apple is that they can be extraordinarily stubborn and extraordinarily petulant if they so desire. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes it's for at least understandable reasons, if not good reasons. But geez, this time I don't think so. It's from everything I know, which admittedly is little, it seems like they just need to put this all to bed and start fresh. So are you going to put a NVIDIA card in your forthcoming Mac Pro, John?
If it's possible to do so, I can imagine doing that because I've had multiple GPUs in the Mac that's sitting right next to me right now, and I don't see why I wouldn't upgrade the GPU in my future Mac Pro, assuming that's a thing that is possible.
And speaking of that, will you be able to configure that Mac Pro, John?
This is on the other end of the spectrum. This is a couple of old articles. I got to look at the dates on these.
This was January, I believe.
Yeah, one from Jason Snell, and then Gruber chimed in about it. But the end of configurable Macs. Some of it is like looking at the products that Apple has released recently, and some of it is just sort of tea leaf reading and thinking about where all this is going. I think Jason was mostly inspired by the MacBook Airs, the fact that there's only one CPU option, which is fairly unheard of for Apple laptops. Usually they have like a fast CPU and a regular CPU, and they charge you a couple $100 to get a small amount of clock speed increase, and people wonder whether they should buy it. Sometimes they'll do like an i5 or an i7, and this historically been a way for Apple to boost its margins because they'll charge you a lot more than it costs them to get the faster CPU, more RAM, more storage, so on and so forth. On the iOS line of computers or computing devices, there's configurability, but it is along fewer axes, mostly just storage. You can't get an iPhone or an iPad with a faster CPU or more RAM. Or if you do get more RAM, it's part of the more storage model. Like, I forget which one, the big iPad Pro, I think, had more RAM with the 1 terabyte of flash or whatever. And so eliminating things that you can vary, like, you can get more storage, but you can't get more memory, you can't get more CPU, or maybe you can't get anything at all. Maybe this is the way it comes. It seems to be the direction Apple is going. And so the open question is, can we envision a future where all of the Macs, except probably the Mac Pro and maybe the iMac Pro, have far fewer things that you can configure about them? Maybe color would still be in the mix because that's the thing that everyone wants to pick, but that you wouldn't have a choice of CPU across any of the Macs, again, except maybe the super duper Pro models. That MacBook, MacBook Pro, Mac Mini, all those would come with just one CPU. It is the one and only CPU that they come with, and it is a good one, and it's made by Apple, for example. Like, it's all ARM CPUs. It comes with we went through this before, the M11, the X12, whatever the heck letter and number combination that Apple comes up with for the Macs. And like all of the MacBooks come with that. All of the MacBook Pros come with the M37 or whatever it's going to be. And you don't have a choice. There's not clock speed differences. You can't get different amounts of RAM in them or whatever. Storage, I can imagine them still, they need some, I feel like they need some dial that they can turn to charge people more money. So I can never imagine them being totally unconfigurable and just having one price, one product, just because they make so much money by charging you more for more storage. But other than storage, I can totally imagine, especially if Apple's making the CPUs on all of them, no longer doing what they have done when other people are making the CPUs, which is always getting, different binned parts and charging you a couple of extra $100 for a minor percentage clock speed increase. And not only can I see them doing that, I don't think it would be that big of a deal. I mean, witness the new MacBook Air. It only comes with one CPU. Nobody cares. There wasn't even like a fake controversy article about it. Like, the best we got were these articles, which is like, hey, look at this. They only offered one CPU on the MacBook Air. Basically, what Apple's revealing is nobody like it's not a thing that people want. Like, past MacBook Airs, you had choices of CPU speed, and all it did was require the customers to make another decision in the purchase process. And they'd have to think, do I want this? Do I want that? And probably the decision most of them made was, minus $99, minus $200, minus whatever, or that I have to charge this much more for some number decimal point to go up that I don't care about. Forget it. I'm skipping it. And so I feel like this is an entirely safe thing to do for CPU speed. Probably also a safe thing to do for RAM. Again, they've done that before. I think there's some MacBook or some Mac models that I think only come with one amount of RAM.
The 12-inch only has one option. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think that's mostly safe on the low end, especially if they give you a reasonable amount. And that just leaves storage, which is where Apple can put all of their money by charging their normal exorbitant prices for additional storage.
And they will.
So I think this is a reasonable prediction. I think we're already most of the way there. And I think it's both a good move and no one will care about it. What do you guys think?
Well, first of all, some real-time follow-up before everyone emails us. Apparently, the 12-inch now does come with configurable RAM up to 16 gigs. It didn't when it first came out.
The 12-inch? Really? Wow.
Yeah, now the high-end 12-inch can go to 16.
Yeah, that's been the case for at least a year, because mine is 16. I'm almost sure.
Well, it hasn't been updated for at least a year.
Well, true. Actually, that's a very good point.
What are you going to do with all that RAM? I don't think the CPU can work its way through all that RAM in a reasonable amount of time.
Don't even get me started. I was just thinking to myself just a couple of days back, I still do love my little MacBook Adorable. It is a great machine. It is exactly what I wanted in the sense that it is hyper portable more than anything else. But holy crap, is this thing slow. Getting the iPad Pro was the worst mistake I've ever made when it comes to continuing to enjoy my Adorable, because it's just painfully slow. It really, really is. Like, when I was not comparing it to an iPad, wasn't that bad. It didn't seem that awful. Of course, it's slower than my iMac. That's to be expected. But holy cow, the iPad Pro is so much quicker than this thing. So I'm kind of the camp of bring on the ARM Macs, because clearly that'll solve all our problems. But to answer your question, do we want configurable Macs? 10-ish years ago, maybe a little more than that, I would have been probably offended, and I choose that word on purpose. I would have been maybe offended at not having any choice as to CPU options and many RAM options and storage options and this and that and the other. But now I mostly don't care. And I think Gruber's point at the very, very end of his link to Jason's post, I think it's perfect, and I agree with it. Gruber wrote, "I want Apple's system architects to do all the work to make the decision for me to find the perfect balance." And I agree with that. I think storage, especially while it's still pretty expensive, I think it makes sense for that to be something that you can tweak. I'm less convinced that RAM is also on that list. I kind of feel like within financial reason, just dump as much RAM as you can into these laptops until, you can't anymore because it's just unaffordable. Storage, it makes sense. I'd also love a configurable cellular radio, but we know that's not going to happen. So,
by the way, why not? Why is that not going to happen? I know you're right, but just like for the sake of putting Apple's feet to the fire, you're like, why does cellular seem like it's something that everyone is just okay with not happening? We have it in the iPad, and it's great. Other PC makers have it in laptops, and it works for them. Why can't we have it in Macs?
Well, let me tell you, Marco. It's because when I try to tether to my phone from my Mac, and I don't touch my phone, it works flawlessly every time. It never has a problem.
Plus, everyone loves draining their phone batteries, right?
That's right. And plus, there's no mechanism for having like a software-based SIM card, so you would have to add another door to the laptop because we haven't figured that out yet either.
Yeah, but it's okay. Nobody has unlimited data plans; those don't exist yet, and definitely are not widespread. So I understand why they wouldn't want Macs to burn all your data.
Oh God, I agree with you. Although, all kidding aside, where would you put the little plastic piece for the cellular antenna, though?
Where do they put all the other antennas?
Yeah, but I don't know.
I think they hide them in the hinge right now. Like they find places to put antennas because laptops are made out of metal and they have a lot of wireless radios in them. So like they find places. This is a solvable problem. All of these are solvable problems and are solved problems in many other devices, including Apple's own devices.
Yep.
This is why it makes me so angry that they don't have cellular, because PC manufacturers have been shipping cellular in laptops for over a decade. Apple has been shipping cellular in iPads since the very first iPad. Well, since 30 days after the very first iPad. But it blows my mind. Why? It would be so useful. And as time goes on, we have more and more justifications for it. It isn't like the need for cellular on laptops is going down over time. It's actually going up over time as more and more people, first of all, want to avoid using public Wi-Fi, for God's sake, and second of all, as hotel Wi-Fi and everything gets all crapped up with people trying to download the entire internet worth of video all at once, and so it becomes decreasingly usable. And again, and you have huge increases of unlimited data plans, which neutralizes a lot of the arguments that Mac OS is not optimized for conserving cellular data, which, by the way, is true, but is also a solvable problem. Apple introduced the NSURL session cellular permission flags years ago, and those same flags exist on macOS, and I don't know if Apple knows about these yet, maybe. I don't know, but they could have rewritten all of their apps to use these. So it isn't a big deal, I don't think, to add support for this kind of stuff. And again, over time, we have unlimited data plans becoming more and more common anyway, and cellular carriers making it easier and easier to add additional devices to your account that have cellular modems besides just phones. Things like smartwatches, iPads. So the reasons to exclude cellular from Macs keep getting eroded away over time. And there's all the more reason too. The only reason you can say for not having it is, well, you can tether to your phone. And yeah, that's true. But why do they have it in the iPad then? If tethering to your phone is good enough, why have cellular in the iPad? The reason why is because it's way, way better than tethering. And there's lots of reasons to do it besides just tethering. And the same things all apply to laptops. So for God's sake, put cellular in the laptops. Anyway, sorry for this massive interruption. Please continue with upgradable Macs.
So I have to ask you and continue your interruption because I agree with you. If you had to choose only SD card slot, have I asked you this already? SD card slot or cellular radio, what do you choose?
Cellular, no question. I would use it more often, and it's harder to add later.
Fair enough. I mean, I agree with you. I'm not going to argue, but I'm slightly surprised because I know you really, really miss your SD card slot. So
I do, but I would use cellular a lot more. Like, because I have it on my iPad. I use it all the time. And there's lots of places where like, you know, I would take my laptop, but I end up taking the iPad because I know it'll be easier to just quickly get online and check stuff on the iPad because it has built-in cellular. But I would like to use my MacBook for a lot more of those things. Anyway, so regarding upgradable Macs, I do have a small rant on this too. I think people are really bad, and I mean this, I know lots of people, I'm friends with people, but people are really, really bad in general at estimating or guessing or deciding which hardware features or upgrades on a computer purchase are going to be useful and important and necessary for them, and which ones are worth the money and which ones aren't for them. I can't blame people for this because these things are marketed in certain ways that make you think that you need certain things or that certain things will be insufficient for you and you need to upgrade X, Y, or Z in order to do application, you know, A, B, or C. The reality is many of these upgrades that they sell you are things that you don't actually need or that have way less of an impact on actual usage than you might think. And CPUs, I think, are the number one offender here. And this doesn't apply to all the product lines. Like the product lines where you have meaningful differences in, say, the number of cores between different options. Like the iMac Pro, you can spec the iMac Pro from, what's the base model, 6 cores, all the way up to 18. There's a massive difference in core count there. Even then, it's not a linear increase in performance because the clock speeds come down as the core count goes up, but you still do get a substantial improvement in performance between those low-end options and those high-end options for, things like the iMac Pro or the Mac Mini, where you have huge differences in CPUs that are available to you. But in most of the products, and especially the portable products, and this is because of power constraints, the difference between the lowest-end CPU offered and the highest-end CPU offered, the difference in performance is usually very small. Way smaller than you would think from like the numbers that are on the page. And it's usually in the range of like 10 to 25% maybe. And so you might be paying like $300 extra to improve your CPU performance by 15%. And it seems like it'd be more than that by the numbers that are on screen, but because of things like turbo boost and thermal limits and power limits, it actually ends up being less than you think in practice. But people tell themselves wonderful marketing lies like, I want to be doing video editing, and so I have to get the absolute highest end thing possible. And it often has very little relation to what their actual hardware needs are in practice and what the thing that they're saying will actually use in practice and will actually need in practice, or the difference it'll actually make. And so many people are totally fine for their needs to be solved by the lowest end option in a lineup, or at best, the mid-range option in a lineup, CPU-wise. RAM-wise, I find I don't even know how much RAM to buy when I buy computers. Let alone, I can't even imagine how other people make this decision. And I think it's based on the same kind of voodoo. It's like, well, I want to edit video, so I guess I'll get the biggest. Or I'm only browsing the web most of the time, so I'll get the smallest. And the reality is, like, how are people supposed to know whether they need 8 or 16 gigs of RAM? If I can't even tell you whether I need, 8, 16, 32, or 64, like, I have no idea. I usually get something near the middle because I can, and I figure I'll probably use it. But, like, I don't know what I'm actually using. How can anyone else know? And the reality is, I have used high-end Macs, like this wonderful iMac Pro I'm using now that has pretty high specs. And I've used mid-range Macs, like my MacBook Pro, which has, it's a 13-inch MacBook Pro. It has nice, mid-range specs there. And I've used the 12-inch MacBook and the crappier one, I think it was the second generation one that I used briefly. I felt some difference between them, with the things I did, but it wasn't like it wasn't as big of a difference in most operation as most people think. Like my MacBook Pro, which, by the numbers should be like a quarter of the speed of my iMac Pro, isn't actually that much slower. In the things I do, even things like building Overcast from scratch in Xcode, it's not that much slower than the iMac Pro. When I was testing the Mac Mini, that I found the same thing. Like, you would expect the Mac Mini to be a lot slower than the iMac Pro, but it wasn't that much slower. It was like it matched it in CPU performance for the things I was actually doing, and it was just slower in a few other ways. But like, so people are really bad at guessing what they need and what they should spend their money on for upgrade budgets and everything. And I think the two worst areas of that are CPU and RAM. So if Apple is removing CPU customizability from low-end and or thermally constrained products, that's fine, because the fact is we don't have that much choice there now. We just have different ways to spend arbitrary amounts of money to get performance gains that are actually way smaller than we think, that we probably won't even notice. RAM is a little more noticeable if you get it wrong, but the base model RAM in most of these machines is what most people buy anyway, and it's fine. We have SSDs now, so running out of RAM when you have an SSD is a lot less of a performance penalty than it used to be when you had spinning disks. And so if we're getting less configurability in these two areas, that's fine. That's for most products in the lineup, that's fine. Now, that is not fine for something like an iMac Pro, where the potential range of processor options and the potential range of RAM amounts is way bigger, and you have more outliers like at the high end, because these are like pro machines for pro workloads and everything, and who knows what pros need. So anything that is targeting a high end use where thermals and cost aren't necessarily constrained very well or very much, it makes sense to offer huge options. Whatever the chipset can handle, whatever the power can handle, offer the biggest options you can and give people a range to pick from. But as you get further down the line, when you're in the smaller products, like especially the small laptops, it totally makes sense to just lock in like one CPU option, one or two amounts of RAM, and then whatever storage customizability you can afford to put in there. Because those are things like the CPU matters almost not at all when you're deciding between like the 12-inch is offered in 3 different CPUs. If you actually look at the difference between those 3, it's very, very small. Why? Why is it 3 different CPUs? The answer is Apple wants free money, right? Like, that's basically what it is. And so does Intel, right? Because some of it's them. But like, the reality is, like, if somebody has the top end, the 1.4 gigahertz processor, yeah, the top end, the 1.4, if you substituted that out for the 1.2, the base model, I bet they wouldn't even notice. I bet almost no one who has the 1.4 would notice if you swapped it out for the 1.2. And that's a $250 premium option. The fact is, like, with the small processors, the small laptops, the small thermal envelopes, this stuff doesn't matter. So, fine. With the new Air, we have one option. I have heard 0 buyers of the new Air and 0 potential buyers of it complain that there is only one CPU option. Literally I've heard it from none of them. And, same thing. I don't know if the RAM's configurable, is it? But if it is, like, that's a lot less important as well. Storage does make a lot of sense to have configurable, because storage is something that is hugely variable in people's needs and is extremely expensive. So you can't just put in like the biggest amount of storage and call it a day, because that would drive up the price of the machine way too much. So that makes sense. And also storage is a hard limit. With a CPU, like, you can edit video on a 12-inch MacBook. It'll just take longer. Yeah, it takes longer. Yes. Like, you can do it, and it's a soft limit. Like, you'll just be delayed, but it still has the same capability. You can still do the task you want to do. It'll just take longer. RAM, similar. It's like, you can still do most things you want to do, whether you have 8 gigs or 16. It'll just take a little bit longer if you don't have the high amount. Storage is a hard wall. Like, you can't just fill your hard disk up bigger if you just do it more slowly. Like, you don't get more space by filling it up slowly. And so that's one thing where, like, it matters a lot more to have that to give that a high ceiling for people to configure. And because it's so expensive, you can't just give everybody the same high ceiling. So yeah, I'm on board with this. There really hasn't been an area that Apple has removed customizability from recently that I have really run into as a real problem. I do have problems with other things that Apple makes non-customizable, like the fact that they use the same keyboard for all of their computers. That I have a big problem with, but that has never been customizable. That's Apple has, as long as I have been an Apple customer, which was since the PowerBook G4, they have used like the same keyboard in all of their laptops. Like that is always.
I never thought that Apple would introduce third-party keyboard support for their laptops, but then they did it.
Right, like
that was we used to think that about iOS, and they actually had a third party. Oh, like a third party keyboard? No, they'll never do that.
No.
For the RAM question, if you're wondering how much RAM you should have or whatever, like we all know this as developers, but customers probably don't. That iOS started as a RAM constrained environment. It was a very different fitness criteria for applications than iOS. And so iOS devices can get away with a fixed, very small amount of RAM. The Mac has a different history. And yes, even with all those iOS apps coming over to the Mac, that's not going to change anytime soon. So I would say on the Mac, if you're wondering whether you should get 8 or 16, if you're going to run a web browser plus Slack plus one other app, get 16. Because if you haven't looked at Activity Monitor lately, just look at how much RAM like your Chrome tabs and Slack are taking by themselves. Like it is obscene how much RAM they take. Not the virtual memory. Like measuring memory is very complicated. There's no one thing you can look at and add up in numbers and come up with a thing that's sane. It's very, very complicated. But and yes, SSDs are way faster than spinning disks, so it's much less important than it used to be. But SSDs are still way slower than RAM. So if you ever have a choice between 8 and 16, and you can stomach Apple's prices, which are ridiculous for that extra 8, get the 16. But you don't need 32 unless you know you need 32. So that's the tricky part with RAM, is that even on the low-end models, if Apple standardized on 8, it would be bad. If Apple standardized on 16 right now, that would be fine. So whatever the inflation-adjusted equivalent of 16 is, like they would have to revisit that number once in a while, but 16 is fine for pretty much everybody. But 8... it's not, you don't have to be running fancy applications to use up all of 8. And then you're swapping to an SSD, and yes, it's fast, but it is not as fast as RAM. But I mostly agree with everything else that Marco said. And it was making me think.
But real-time follow-up. Apparently I have 64 gigs of RAM in my iMac Pro.
Yeah, maybe that's why you don't notice any issues.
And I'm currently using 39 gigs.
Yeah.
So how about that?
What are you running? What things have dots under them in the dock?
Oh boy. I mean, how much time do you have it? So, Finder, Mail, Messages, Safari, Things, iTunes, TextMate, Chrome, Xcode, Dash, Terminal, Tower, Slack, Preview, Calendar, Notes, Solver, Numbers, Tweetbot, Photos, ReadKit, Audio Hijack, Colloquy, and Skype, and Activity Monitor.
All right, so that's a lot of apps. But you're just over the threshold of a 32, so you wouldn't be fit into a 16. I'm only using around 8. I am running Safari, BB Edit, Terminal, Colloquy, Chrome, and Slack, and Audio Hijack, and Skype. But there is a gig of swap in use, and I close all. I don't actually have a lot of windows or tabs open at this point because I close everything down when I podcast for the most part. But anyway, yeah, 8 is a little bit too little to have breathing room, especially like when there's another reason people spend the extra money for the faster CPU is they feel like it's going to give them more longevity out of the machine. And it might, but RAM will give you much more longevity than CPU will, because there's some, say you bought RAM not knowing that Slack would come into existence, then it becomes an important part of your life. And you just didn't realize how much of a RAM pig it was going to be, and the fact that it's going to be running all the time and potentially has a memory leak. Like, on the Mac, that's the type of thing that can happen. On iOS, it can't happen because anything that was that much of a RAM pig would never run for more than 60 seconds at a time before being killed.
What the hell is Adobe Desktop Service?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's half a gig right there.
Yep. Like, well, what column are you looking at? Like, you can't really. This is the
memory
with RAM. No, you have to look at a real memory.
Real memory? Okay.
Memory is the virtual memory, but even real memory, it's not. You can't just add up all those numbers. It's
Wait, real memory is way more than memory for some of these. Like it says photos 4.5 gigs, but real memory is 4.5. Memory is 730 megs.
I don't know. I thought memory was V size and real memory was RSS in PS parlance.
Yeah, see, it's very hard to actually know like how much RAM is an app actually using because it isn't that simple.
Yeah, real memory says R size, which itself is a complicated concept when you mouse over it. Private memory is yeah. I think I tried to do an article about this once, explaining exactly how RAM is divvied up, and like there is no number you can get out of PS where you can add up a bunch of things and get two values. That's like, here's how much is in the RAM chips on my computer, and here's how much is in the SSD. You'd have to go page by page and figure out who's sharing this page from this shared library, and is it in RAM? Like you'd have to dump the whole page table. It's ridiculous. Anyway, it's very difficult to express this to users, but you do know when swap is in use because you can see things getting paged in and out, and you can feel things getting slower. So.
We are sponsored this week by Away. For $20 off a suitcase, visit awaytravel.com/ATP and use promo code ATP during checkout. Away makes quite simply awesome, thoughtfully designed suitcases at incredible prices. So their most famous one is their carry-on. Away considered all types of travelers and made this carry-on now in 2 sizes with an optional ejectable battery. You can now buy them in their signature polycarbonate, which is a wonderful German polycarbonate material that's very, very strong, or you can also buy it now in anodized aluminum. Both materials are guaranteed for life. If you get that optional battery, you can charge your phone up to 5 times from it. So if you're sitting around waiting in the airport, you always have a phone charger ready to go. And it's TSA compliant and ejectable with just 1 click. So if you need to check your bag, you can just pop the battery out and bring it with you on board. No problem at all. Their suitcases feature an interior compression system, so it lets you pack more. It's incredibly useful. 4 360-degree spinner wheels guarantee a smooth ride and easy maneuverability through the airport. And they have a TSA-approved combination lock. And my favorite feature is their removable, washable laundry bag. Because as you travel, you want to keep your dirty clothes separate from your clean clothes. And then when you get home, you just pop it out and dump it in the washing machine. It's wonderful. So check it out today at awaytravel.com/ATP. And you can take advantage of not only our wonderful promo code, $20 off a suitcase, but also they have a 100-day trial period, risk-free. So you can try a suitcase for 100 days. And you can, of course, travel with it. You can actually buy it and take it on a trip, because how else would you test it? And if you don't like it, you can return it within 100 days for a full refund. Check it out today, awaytravel.com/ATP, and use promo code ATP during checkout for $20 off a suitcase. Because this season, everyone wants to get away.
Anyway, your discussion before of like cellular and the configurability of laptops and everything was making me think of something I've been thinking about for a couple of weeks now, but I haven't been able to come up with a good visualization. So I suppose people can make a bunch of charts and then spam them at us. And I just wrote it in the notes doc to remind myself to talk about it as the MacBook hierarchy of needs, but it's not really a hierarchy. It's not really what I'm thinking of. It's like, so new laptops are coming. We're all excited about them. There's a bunch of things that could potentially come in new laptops. And I was visualizing them as kind of like an ordered list. And as you go down the list, like if you went down the whole list, it's a short list. It's maybe like 5 or 10 things, probably less than 10 things. If everything on the list appeared like in the new laptops, you'd be like, these are the best laptops ever. Apple is amazing. And if none of them appeared, you'd be super mad because like they didn't fix anything. Like, they're still crappy like they are now, right? And it's a ranked list. So the top item is the one that you say, Apple has to do this. This is the most important thing for them to do. And the second one is like, oh, here's the second most important. And you have to decide as you go down the list, it's sort of like a color coding. At what point do you draw a line and say, this is the line of acceptability? Like, let's say, where if they do this one or these 2 or these 3 things, they will have acceptably addressed the shortcomings of the current laptops. And then there's the next line, which is like, if they do these 4 or these 5 things, they will have really good laptops. And then if they do these 6 or 7, they will have great laptops. And if they do 8, 9, and 10, they have the best laptops ever. And I'm sure we all have different lists, but and I can imagine a diagram and sort of like color, or maybe like a temperature bar thing or color again. And what I'm referring to, by the way, with the MacBook hierarchy needs is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is actually kind of inverted, where it's like the basic things that everybody needs is like, what is it? Safety is the bottom. No, actually, the Wikipedia page says psychological is the bottom need. Anyway, there's safety, then there's love and belonging, then there's esteem, and there's self-actualization. And so you need safety, because if you don't have safety, if you don't have physical safety, who's worried about self-actualization, right? That's the idea, that there's certain things you need to address because they're like serious concerns and you can't worry about the other things until you address that. But as you go up in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you get to things that are sort of more nice to have, where at the very top is like, I've got everything else going on in my life, and my final thing is self-actualization, right? So the inverted version of that in the MacBook hierarchy of needs is, I'm assuming we can all agree, number one is keyboard, right? And I would say, if you have to subdivide that, you would say keyboard reliability, because you can't start addressing key layout or key feel or anything else you care about keyboards until you do reliability, right? And then we can start arguing about what number 2 and 3 and 4 are. But I think the most interesting part there is, where would you draw the line? Like let's say the line of acceptability, where they introduce new MacBooks and the new MacBooks have a reliable keyboard, right? I mean, as determined over the next 6 months or whatever. Do you draw a line right after that and say they will have crossed the line of acceptability if everything else about the laptops doesn't change, or like is a wash, doesn't get any better, but they have reliable keyboards? Is that acceptable, or is there a second item and a third item? I don't think we have to solve this now, but I am visualizing like a color-coded rainbow chart that we work our way down during the keynote. And I know they're not really ordered, and I know Apple could like introduce items number 1 and 5 and 7. So there's probably some visualization that would let us know ahead of time. So we sort of, for our own personal opinions, and say, here's what I think. If they hit X, Y, and Z, here's how I'll feel about it. And doing that before the announcement, as opposed to just seeing what they announce and then deciding how you feel about it, is a way to keep yourself from going off the deep end and saying, this one pet thing that I wanted, whether it's like an SD card slot or cellular or whatever, isn't there, and therefore I think these laptops are crap, even though they have like 5 of the items that I said I wanted and they've passed into the line of greatness or whatever.
That's tough, because on the one side, I want to snark and say, oh, well, obviously, if they don't have a good keyboard, I can't buy it. But that's not really true. I'm going to buy anything that has...
It's not a question of like whether you'll buy it or not. It's like the line of acceptability is basically, have they improved on the current models? Let's say they just kept giving the current models butterfly keyboards, they update the CPUs, they give more RAM, they like blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not like we wouldn't buy them because we'd have no choice. They'd be the only Mac laptops. But I think we would all agree that they have not addressed any of the problems that we see with the current laptop lineup. We feel like the current crop of laptops of the last 3 years or so have problems. We want to see those problems addressed. And I feel like the line of acceptability is, okay, Apple, you've addressed enough of the problems from our personal estimations with the current laptops that I feel like, okay. All right, maybe they're still not my favorite laptops in the world, but you've gotten out from under the dark shadow that is the butterfly keyboard, for example. And then from there, of like, oh, these are good laptops, or these are great laptops, or these are the best laptops Apple has ever made. Like, all the way up and or down the hierarchy, depending on how you invert your pyramid.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I agree with your definition of the pyramid. Like, it's not necessarily would I buy it, because we all know I'm going to buy no matter what it is. But it's more like, what will make it fixed? Like what will be like, this is now on the right track, or this is no longer a product category that is on fire or covered in asterisks. And yeah, for me, keyboard is number 1. And if they did nothing else except give it a good keyboard again, and I define good there as multiple facets. Reliability is number 1, but like if all they do is replace the keyboard with a good keyboard again, I consider that good enough. I would like to see more improvements than that. Cellular is very high on that list, but other than that, like, it's literally like just a good keyboard is the only single required thing for me to say this product is back on track.
Yeah, it's so tough. I think I'm less disgruntled with the current laptop line than you are, Marco, and John hates anything that you can move around. So obviously he doesn't like the laptops. It's tough for me to say. I have definitely had some keyboard problems with my MacBook, but they haven't yet been egregious enough to make me really angry about them. I actually quite like the feel of the keyboard, even if I don't particularly care for the reliability. So I don't know, man. Like, I don't feel like there's anything really holding me back from buying another one today, except that I don't particularly feel like I need one. And in terms of in general, is the line back on track? Then yeah, I think it's what you said. It's a reliable keyboard and probably little else. Now, John, earlier on, you had said basically, if this and this happened, it would be the best portable computer ever made. I think for me that would be continued extreme lightness, because that's the kind of laptop I favor these days. All day battery, which is obviously in direct,
which your laptop does not have.
Yeah, and I can't have them both, right? I can't have it be extremely portable and light and also have an all day battery. Something that's reasonably speedy with a reasonably nice screen. Like another thing that Marco, I know you're really bothered by that doesn't bother me as much, is not having true pixel doubling, at least by default, So that I can understand why that annoys you, but it's not something that I'm particularly bothered by.
And like that isn't like a huge deal. Like that is like I consider huge deals to be like things that I don't like or that I'm worried about pretty much every time I use it. And really the number one thing on that list is the keyboard. Like I never like it. And no matter how long, I've been using these keyboards on and off now for almost 3 years, and I still don't like them. But I'm also always worried that it's going to break, and I'm afraid. Like I use my laptop very gently, and I'm afraid to use it in a lot of conditions where I'm totally fine using my iPad because I'm not worried about like getting a speck of dust on it. But like I'm afraid to use my laptop in a lot of conditions because I know how incredibly fragile that keyboard is, and if a speck of dust goes near it just the wrong way, there goes $700 and a week of not having my laptop. It's a constant worry. And for anybody who has these machines, if it isn't a constant worry for you, it should be, because they are that fragile and it is that random and capricious when they stop working. And it is that much of a pain to get them repaired. So it's like that to me, like it's that overshadows everything. The rest of it, like the USB-C only thing, the lack of the card reader, the lack of MagSafe, the higher price, like all that stuff is stuff that I've had 2.5 years to very slowly come to terms with. And I mostly have the touch bar also. Like I still don't like the touch bar, but if my only option to on the next laptop is a good keyboard that happens to also have a touch bar, fine, I'll take it. Like everything else I can say, fine, I'll take it, but not the keyboard reliability and in general the keyboard design. But the reliability is the number one problem. Like I worry about that every single time I use the computer, and that negatively impacts when and how I feel comfortable using the computer. And so that's bigger than everything else.
When I was thinking of this, I was mostly thinking of it not so much as, I mean, the line of acceptability is an interesting question, but I was thinking of it in terms of how, if they go down the entire list, they'd make, the best laptop Apple has ever made. Because in many respects, Apple's current laptops are the best they've ever made. For example, in terms of size and weight and sturdiness of the chassis, they're better than they've ever been. They're thinner than they've ever been. They're very sturdy. They look really good. Like that aspect of the design is great. It's just they've dropped the ball in other areas. So I was thinking like, if they just go down this whole list, they'll be great. And I haven't really drawn lines, but I've typed up while we've been talking what I think is my personal list. And it's not that long. It's like 7 items long. And if they did all 7 of these things, potentially this is the greatest line of laptops Apple has ever made. So my number 1 is keyboard reliability. My number 2 is screen resolution, like, native 2x, all the stuff we've talked about. That's just important enough to me. I feel like it's fundamental, just like the keyboard. I'm talking about the Pro laptops, by the way. I'm not talking about the MacBooks. I'm saying the MacBook Pro. In particular, I'm thinking of the 15-inch, but you can map to the 13-inch. It's a true Retina res at least the old number of points, right? Number 3 is the keyboard layout and having like a real escape key. So this includes anything improving the inverted T and, maybe an home and end key on the 15-inch and all that stuff. Like keyboard layout is my number 3. My number 4 is SD card, just because I have a camera that uses SD cards. Number 5 is improved battery life, because as bad as the battery life is with the current things, I don't, it's lower on my list than all those other things just because I can get by with the battery the way it is. Like, it's ridiculous when, WebEx drains my battery in an hour-long meeting, but I'm usually not that far from plugs or whatever. So for me, battery life is number 5. 6 is cellular. I think it's cool, but it's and I would use it, but it's below all those other things. 7 is MagSafe, a return of magnetic attached cables. That I can work around that with a little MagSafe thing that I have from my MacBook Air, but it would be great for it to be built in. And the last item is other additional ports, whatever those ports may be. I don't really care, but just the idea that it wouldn't just be USB-C on the side. If they did all those things, had a reliable keyboard, native 2x, improved keyboard layout and a real escape key, SD card slot, improved battery life, cellular, magnetic thing, and some other ports, that could potentially be the best laptops Apple's ever made. We're not going to get all that, I know, but I think that list is technologically feasible, let's say. Apple could build this computer and sell it for a reasonable price as the 15-inch MacBook Pro, and it would be the best laptop they've ever made. They won't, for reasons that I find personally frustrating, but there's that. So now my line of acceptability is, I have to say, I think it's after number 2, keyboard reliability and screen res. That's just my personal opinion, but the screen res thing really bothers me. And I can't live in a world where we just accept from this point on that there'll be non-native res on Apple's Pro laptops forever and ever. It's bad. I don't like it. So that's my line of acceptability. And then after that, things get scrambled because I don't think they're going to put an SD card in it. I don't think they're going to change the keyboard layout, but those are my next 2 items. So they're probably going to skip that and maybe go to like improved battery life and then skip everything else. And they'll end up having good laptops. That's just my current thinking. I'm sure everyone else's lists vary. If I had to make a similar list for the Mac Pro, it would be a big giant mess. I don't even know. And honestly, the Mac Pro is more of I feel like with the Mac Pro, I have an out. They don't make a Mac Pro that fits my bill. I'll just buy an iMac Pro. It's a good computer. I just want them to be back in the market of making Pro Macs. And in hopes that there will be another one after that, unlike the trash can, and that they have another chance to take a run at. Just like with the laptops. They made a bunch of laptops that we have problems with, but they're going to keep making more laptops, so they have more chances to get it right. I just want the Mac Pro to be like that. A computer that they make more of every year or 2. That's all. Anyway.
It shouldn't be a lot to ask.
Yeah.
A keyboard that works.
That's my laptop list. Maybe I'll refine it before WWDC or whenever we think they're going to announce laptops, and then we can all go down the list and check off and see where we end up on our MacBook hierarchy of needs and or wants.
Yeah, I'm working on mine as you're talking, and I'm not satisfied with it. I don't know. What I've come up with, which again, I'm not terribly satisfied with, is improved keyboard reliability, and I'd also like the inverted T. I do miss that.
Yeah.
And that is pretty much the line of acceptability for me. Again, I don't.
Is that one item or 2?
Well, I don't know. Dealer's choice.
Well, I said good keyboard, but that's a compound item.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if they failed on the inverted T, then whatever. I would be annoyed
and they will,
by it.
Don't worry.
And they will. I'd be annoyed by it, but I would move on. So to me, the line is just a better keyboard. Be that one item or 2. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm counting it as one, though. My next thing is cellular. I would love to see cellular. Again, I don't think it'll happen. MagSafe, I don't think it'll happen. That's 3. 4 is an SD card slot. 5 is improved battery life. 6 is more frequent updates to the line. Even though I don't buy a computer every year or every month because my name is not Marco, I would still like to see more frequent updates. I mean, I don't think you guys understand how tough it is to be a laptop fan. We haven't gotten updates in I don't know, a year.
Mm-hmm. That's not a feature of our product, though.
No, that's true.
I'm going to nix that one.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
To me, what matters, some of these things matter, updates matter only on an extreme scale, right? If a product line only gets updated every 1.5 to 3 years, that matters if you're if you're itching to buy one from 1 year in and you have to wait for the new models to come out in order to buy something that you think is current. That sucks. But once you own it, that stops mattering. And there's a lot of these things once you already own it, things like the release schedule or even a lot of the purchase price or the upgrade pricing, a lot of that stuff is a one-time pain before or during purchase, but then after purchase, you can move on and it isn't constantly impacting you. Whereas things like an unreliable keyboard, that impacts you the entire life of the product. So that to me, that's way more important. Any factor that impacts you the whole time you own it is way more important than one-time pains up front.
I think that's fair. So my list then is keyboard, and that's where my line is. Better keyboard, more reliable, and inverted T. Then below or above the line, however you want to look at it, cellular, MagSafe, SD slot, battery life, and more ports. Because, and I think I would move more ports way the crap up if I was committed forever to only buying an Adorable, because I got to tell you, it is really nice to use, I believe they're a past sponsor, a Luna display with your MacBook Adorable to get a lot more real estate when you're, say, working on like an iOS app or something like that, or Final Cut. However, that is really, really, really not as fun when you only have one port, and that one port is being taken up by the Luna display. And so I have a like 2-hour limit of having multiple monitors on my laptop because, when it comes to, using the iPad as a second monitor, because after that, my battery's dead and I need to disconnect the Luna display, which happened to me just the other night. So, more ports would be like number one on my list if I knew I was going to buy an Adorable and only an Adorable for the rest of my life. But the fact of the matter is this is a self-created problem because I could have just as well chosen a different laptop that has at least one more port.
Yeah, I've got improved battery life somewhere in the middle of my list, but obviously the ARM thing we expect will take care of that. Like we're going to get that whether we ask for it or not. Unlike all the other things on this list, other than keyboard reliability.
Are we going to get it? Because any gains that are possible by moving to ARM, Apple could spend those by just making the battery smaller to make the laptop smaller and thinner.
But I don't think they will, because I think like the 10-hour battery on the iPad, I feel like Apple's line for acceptability for a pro laptop battery life, they're currently below that line. They're below it because they, this is the trade-offs they've made, but I think they're slightly below it. So I think we're getting improved battery life as a guarantee with the ARM. Not like fantastically better, because like you said, they can choose to trade it off, but I feel like they're not going to say, the current laptops have about the right battery, especially like in terms of peak performance, like if you run it hard, how they drain down so fast. Like I feel like Apple, would like their current line of laptops to get a little bit better. So when they have the ability to do that, they're not going to trade it all away for thinness. I think they're going to, they're going to do it for that. And, and keyboard reliability, I'm thinking about this too in my more pessimistic moments. Like I'm very certain that they're going to come out with a new keyboard, but I guess nobody can be really certain that the new keyboard will fix all the reliability problems. Obviously, that's the whole point of the new keyboard, is to solve the problems presented by the old keyboard. But it's not like Apple set out to make an unreliable keyboard, right? So it's the type of thing where we'll all be happy when they announce a laptop with a new keyboard, however they present it. But we still kind of have to take a wait-and-see attitude to say, okay, is it actually more reliable? Because I don't think it's getting 10 times thicker. It's not going back to the old keyboard. It's going to be a new, thin keyboard that we hope doesn't have problems. But that's not an easy thing for Apple to make, apparently. So there's that possibility as well. So I'm going to say improved battery life is, even if only slightly, is a guarantee with the ARM transition. Keyboard reliability is a guaranteed thing Apple will try to do. And everything else on this list is potentially able to be ignored by Apple, which I find very annoying because, once again, everything on this list is A, available on PC laptops, and B, entirely within the realm of feasibility for Apple to make without any significant, downsides in terms of, we have to increase the price by hundreds of dollars, or it is compromised in some terrible way that makes it a worse product. People would love this product that I listed on all these things. They would love it. Again, just for the 15-inch. Put all these things on the 15-inch. Nobody would say, I was going to buy a new 15-inch, but I found out it comes with an SD card slot, so screw that computer.
Yeah, like if you want to have a minimal laptop that offers as little as possible, despite the hostility it provides to actual use, focus that all on the 12-inch, because those buyers relish in that.
Hey, guys.
Sorry, Mark. We covered this on past shows. There's no room for another port on that computer.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Back when people were much more willing to believe that Apple could do no wrong, very strongly argue that there is literally no room for another port on a computer that size.
Seriously, if you gave me the same computer, or if Apple made available this exact same computer with all the same internals that I was just whining about, half an hour ago, if they made this exact same computer, but with a second port and charged me another $2,500, whatever I paid for this thing for it, I would buy that tomorrow. I really would.
I have great news for you, Casey. They do make that computer.
I don't want a MacBook Pro.
No, get a MacBook Air.
MacBook Air, yeah.
That's true. You're probably right.
The MacBook Air is almost exactly what you want. The only thing is, like, it is significantly heavier and bigger. Going from 2.0 pounds to 2.75 pounds is a pretty big difference. And going from 12-inch to the 13-inch body, it is noticeably bigger and heavier. However, the new MacBook Air is basically a 2-port MacBook. Like, that's basically what they made. It's very similar in a lot of ways, and it's a lot better in a lot of ways. Every curve or continuum has like a certain point at which, like, you can make things, smaller and smaller and thinner, and at some point there's like an optimal balance. And then at some point you like fall off a cliff with, like, when you pass this certain point, the trade-offs are no longer worth it, and they start becoming really severe trade-offs that start to really impact you in ways that are no longer worth the trade-offs. I think the 12-inch for a lot of people's uses is on the fallen off the cliff side of that, whereas the 13-inch MacBook Air is comfortably on the other side of the line. So I think if you want a super portable computer and you're willing to give up some performance and stuff to get there, the 13-inch MacBook Air is a way, way better balance for most people's needs than the 12-inch. And I'm not saying the 12-inch should stop existing, because there are people for whom that super tininess of it is worth those trade-offs, but it's such a severe drop-off in utility to get that you're an able-bodied, young-ish person. You can carry an extra 3/4 of a pound, and it's fine, right? Like, Apple already makes the computer that you should buy, and it's the new MacBook Air. Except for that stupid keyboard.
Well, not with that keyboard, maybe.
Yeah. Actually, that keyboard has proven to be pretty unreliable, actually. But yeah, like that, they're almost making, like, I mean, the keyboard you have now is worse. so
depends.
It is an upgrade.
Reliability-wise, maybe it's slightly worse, but might be better feel-wise. Oh, and not so real-time follow-up. I realized that when I'm looking at this Wikipedia page, the bottom item in Maslow's hierarchy, I just misread the word because the text is small and I'm tired and my eyes are blurring. Physiological safety, not psychological. Physiological physiological needs, like, am I hungry, and then above that is safety. Am I in danger of, like, being attacked by cougars or whatever? And then love, belonging, then esteem, then self-actualization. So the hierarchy, the MacBook hierarchy is not so neat as Maslow's hierarchy, but what can you do?
We are sponsored this week by Eero. Finally, Wi-Fi that works. We all know by now that one Wi-Fi router, no matter how many antennas it has on top, just doesn't cover your entire house. There's always slow spots or dead zones. What you need is a distributed Wi-Fi system that broadcasts from multiple points. Eero is by far the best one of these I have ever used. It is fantastic. It's so easy to set up. The units are super nice looking and very technologically advanced. They have all the fastest radios in them, all the fastest standards and everything. But again, the app is by far the easiest to set up Wi-Fi system I have ever seen, single or multi-router. It is that good. So if you're setting it up like for family, or if you just don't want to deal with this kind of stuff, get Eero. It is fantastic. Eero also now offers Eero Plus. This is an optional subscription that is designed to provide simple, reliable security to defend your entire home's devices against a growing number of threats and unsuitable content. So the combination of Eero routers with Eero Plus provides complete protection for your network and all the devices on them as they connect to the internet. So this includes the ability to block malicious and unwanted content across your entire network. You can also have parental controls, so if you don't want your children to browse to certain types of things, you can block those. There's, of course, advanced securities, so they can prevent you from accidentally visiting malware sites. And there's things like ad blocking to get rid of annoying ads and pop-ups on all of your devices and improve load times for ad-heavy sites. And it includes third-party security apps such as Encrypt.me, 1Password, and Malwarebytes antivirus software. It's a great deal. So check it out at Eero.com/ATP and use code ATP, and you can get $100 off the package that includes the Eero base unit, 2 beacons, and 1 year of Eero Plus. So once again, get $100 off this package with Eero base unit, 2 beacons, and 1 year of Eero Plus at Eero.com/ATP by using code ATP at checkout. Thank you so much to Eero for sponsoring our show. Never think about Wi-Fi again.
Let's do some Ask ATP. And let's start with Matt Corkum, who writes, Hey, John, what is the maximum you would spend on the new Mac Pro? Maybe, or perhaps the Macs on the tower itself and the monitor separately, if you'd like to enumerate those numerals differently.
So keep in mind the answer to this question is heavily warped by the fact that I'm using a 10-year-old computer right now and have been saving money for a long time. So this is not to say that this is how much money I would typically spend on a computer. But
Wait, can we guess first before you say?
Go ahead, yeah.
Casey, what's your guess?
I think John is willing to spend somewhere around $7,500 for the computer and the monitor.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the computer and monitor separately, just so you know.
Oh, okay. So I think he would spend easily $5,000 on the computer, probably as much as. Actually, I bet you would do $7,000 on the computer, and I think you would do another couple thousand on the monitor or monitors. So I would guess all in, you're sitting at between $7,000 and $9,000.
All right, so I'm guessing. See, there is going to be some kind of value judgment here. Like, I don't know what upgrades John will consider worthwhile to go all the way to the max, because like when you go to the max for things like RAM or SSD size, there's a massive step up in price, right? So I don't know. Like, is he going to go for the 4 terabyte SSD? Is he going to go for the 64 or 128 gigs of RAM? Like, those are going to be like huge steps up in price. That like those alone are like probably $3,000 each. Right, so like, there's going to be the question of that, but I'm guessing because it has been so long, and because John has been so frustrated at not having a new Mac Pro, he's had so long to save, and he's even dropped hints before that he's had like 10 years to save up, and John doesn't buy a lot of expensive things. So I'm guessing that the budget for this is higher than what you said, Casey. I'm guessing that he will actually end up spending more like 9,000 or 10,000 on the tower or whatever it is itself. And the monitor, I mean, this is kind of just a guess at what the monitor will cost. I'm guessing the monitor costs between $2,000 and $3,000. So I'm going to say total of around $12,000.
Boy, you guys, one just 2 or 3 shows ago, you were trying to make fun of me for my frugality, which you coarsely described as cheapness. I think you're both underestimating my frugality. My limits, and obviously this could change based on the computer, and then again based on the price of the options, because like there is a possibility that I spend way too much on a really big SSD just because I hate running out of room on stuff I wouldn't spend on the RAM. My current thinking is not over 6K for the computer and not over 2K for the monitor. That's my current.
Oh, so I was pretty close.
Yeah, you were close. You were off by like just one digit. Like that, I would be willing to spend 5,000 something for the computer, but if the computer starts pushing up into 6,000, I would reconsider, and I'd be willing to spend 1,800 for the monitor. But if it's like a 2,500 monitor, I'd reconsider it. Now with the monitor thing, if there is no other monitor, I would probably go higher just because I'm gonna have to have an Apple monitor, right? But I'm hoping that if the monitor is more than $2,000, that there's a 5K option, I would just take that one. It would cost less. That's my current thinking. You feel free to play this back to me when I plunk down $12,000 for the Marco computer.
I hope you do. I really hope you do. Not just to make me right, because I'm right. I'm right enough. I don't need this.
You were describing the computer you're going to get, Marco. That's what you were describing.
Yeah,
maybe, but like
Mr. 64 gigs of RAM in his iMac Pro.
But like seriously, like you've gone this long. It means so much to you. You don't really treat yourself in a lot of other ways. For God's sakes, like life is short. Get the 4 terabytes.
That's the new ad campaign from Apple. Marco Arment for Apple Computer. Life is short. Get the 4 terabytes. Don't look at the price tag.
Treat yourself. My word. Oh man! All right. Well, I'm gonna claim victory on that one until you end up paying 10,000+ for this thing.
Yeah, there's no victory until the receipt's in hand.
Oh yeah. Make sure we bring the receipts. Anyway, Asaj writes, for thousands of people, you are professional podcasters, but many of you do different things full time. What do you consider yourself to be with regards to career? Programmers, podcasters, quote unquote influencers. I can start with this. I still don't think of myself as a really and truly professional podcaster, because that's not really a job, right? But if you look at how I make money, yes, it is. And yes, I am. But I still think of myself as a developer predominantly. And If I wanted to use like a really self-involved term, I guess a producer, because in terms of both creating video content and creating written content. And so I think of myself as a developer / quote unquote producer, even though the reality of the situation is I am a podcaster. Marco, how do you feel about this?
For years, I would always write like in like, anything that was asking me my job title, like when I'm like, filling out something for the IRS or like, entering a country and ask for like your occupation, I would always write software developer. And so for years I considered myself a programmer, number one. And it was only recently that I started, like, if somebody asks me what I do now, I'll usually say I'm a podcaster and an app developer. And I'll say it in that order. I spend more of my life creating podcasts than I do writing software at this point.
Mine is easier because I just have a regular day job. I always tell people I'm a programmer, and that just shuts them up because they don't want to hear about it. I mean, it's such a dated term at this point. Everyone says like developer or software engineer. I always just say programmer because it dates me because that's how old I actually am. I am of the age when what I wanted to be was a programmer, and that's what I ended up being, and I just keep calling myself that. And honestly, I don't really, I like my Twitter bio, I think says like programmer, tech writer, and podcaster, but I haven't done tech writing in forever. But I don't know, like it's hard to pin yourself down. Like I did do a bunch of tech writing. I feel like it's a defining characteristic of my quote unquote career. But just because I don't do it now doesn't mean I don't feel like a writer. Just like if I stopped podcasting, I would still feel like a podcaster. But programmer is what I say to people, and then they don't ask any more questions.
I should try that because app developer, I always hear people's dumb ideas for apps.
Yeah, people love apps. No one likes programs.
Hey, I have this great idea for an app. Can you help me make it? Well, first you got to sign this NDA so you don't steal my idea.
10 print John, 20 go to 10. I'm a programmer. I write programs.
Oh, my word.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, Hover, Eero, and Away. And we'll see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
So since everyone loves hearing about cars, we thought we would move the last Ask ATP to the after show for you. All right, Vincent S. Was kind enough to send me a recording of how you pronounce his surname, but I genuinely don't think my mouth can make those sounds, so we'll just go with Vincent. Writes, what do you think of the Polestar 2? Now, if you're not familiar, Polestar used to be like the M division of Volvo, or at least that was my understanding anyway, and recently they have kind of they've pivoted. I'm sorry, let's bring this into programmer/developer terms. They've pivoted to being Volvo's all-electric arm, or predominantly electric arm. And Volvo has recently announced the Polestar 2, which is kind of sort of a Model 3 equivalent. I happen to think it's pretty good looking, although, John, I know you and I were talking, all three of us were talking privately in Slack, and you said you did not care for the look of it, and we can talk about that in a minute. But all told, it appears to be basically a Model 3, but to my eyes, better looking, and from a manufacturer that's probably going to have a whole lot less problems and will probably be able to service this, which is a novel idea for a Tesla owner to actually get service and do so timely.
Hey, low blow.
It's true.
It
true.
is.
It hurts because it's true. But I mean, I haven't looked too much into this. There's a really great video that, John, you had linked to us from Top Gear, not the television program, but the journalist, organization, where they did like a 10-minute quick look on it, which I guess wasn't that quick. But anyway, it looks really good to me. I am really enthusiastic about other traditional manufacturers getting into all electric cars. And I am not in the market for a car and won't be hopefully for many years, 5+ years. But if I were in the market for a car today, I would take a very serious look at this. I really, really would. I'd like to hear Marco's input last as someone who actually has an electric car. But John, what do you think about this?
I think modern day Volvo has been on a bit of a run of making some really nice cars. In particular, I like the turn their styling has taken over the last 5 years or so, which
Very
is why
much agree.
It breaks my heart that this car is ungainly and ugly.
Very much disagree.
It's not ugly, but it is ungainly, and it's just so slightly off of all their other beautiful cars. Like you made all these beautiful internal combustion cars. You have a chance to do an electric one, which has far less stuff inside it. And this is what you come up with, this sort of tall, chunky looking sedanish thing. It's just it breaks my heart. But all that said, I think it will probably be a pretty good car. And it's a reasonable balance of features and range and performance and typical Volvo safety. So I think, I mostly give a thumbs up to the car. The styling just breaks my heart because there's just no reason they needed to blow it like this. And then you see the Polestar 1, which is their hybrid, fancier coupe looking thing. And I think the Polestar 1 is not as nice looking as some of their gasoline cars, but it is way better than the two. So anyway,
the one is way better looking. I agree with you.
I mean, it's a coupe. It's easy to make it low slung and stuff like that. But I hope the Polestar 2 is not the way Volvos are going to look going forward. I hope it's just their first awkward electric and that they'll sort it out eventually.
Marco.
This is the kind of car that I've been waiting for more automakers to make. Tesla should not be the only car maker making the kind of cars that it makes. I'm very happy with my car, but Tesla is not perfect, and they could certainly use more competition. And I would certainly like to have more choices that offer the kind of things that I like about my Tesla in the future. They should not be the only company making these things. And so the Volvo Polestar 2 is Polestar the brand name? Is it like saying Toyota Lexus?
It's like AMG or where it's affiliated, but they want it to be a separate thing. I don't know how successful they're going to be, but AMG is technically not the same as Mercedes, but everyone knows it is. What is it? Hyundai has Genesis, same type of thing.
Right.
Genesis is a better example. I was going to say Ram versus Dodge, because the pickups are now.
No, it's not Ram. It's totally Hyundai Genesis. The successful ones, Toyota, Lexus, and Nissan Infiniti, those are the successful ones, but there's been a bunch of half successful ones recently. And so far, I think this is in the half successful category, but we'll see.
All right. Well, anyway, so the Polestar 2, I think I'm really happy to see this coming from a company that has the long-standing manufacturing and logistics expertise that Volvo does. That is something that we really need. And that's I hope this takes off very well. It is, I don't think it's for me for lots of reasons. Number one, it says that, in regards to color and material selection, it says no bad combinations. But I would argue there's also no good combinations. This car comes in 6 different colors of gray, ranging from white to black. It is literally like a grayscale. It's like you have 6 different shades. The top one is white, the bottom one is black, and you have 4 in the middle that are all kind of grayish.
Yeah, that's very true.
Have they ever had caffeine? These are the most boring configurations I've ever seen of a car.
Midnight does look pretty good to me, though, which is the almost black, but not quite black. Also, I like that their black, speaking of being a programmer, John, is called Void.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I agree. From the pictures, Midnight is the least terrible color that I can see in this list. But yeah, it just, come on, give it some personality. But other than that, it's fine. It looks fine. My main concern with something like this is that even a company with the history of a big maker like Volvo, I still wouldn't want to buy their very first mass market electric car because you're still going to be a beta tester at that point, and it's going to have a lot of problems that they're going to have to work out just after it gets to market. It's going to have, you're going to have all those 1.0 issues, right? And I didn't buy a Tesla until they had been around for 5 years, or shipping cars for 5 years, and I feel like I jumped in at a pretty good time because by that time, a lot of the kinks had been worked out. They were already on their second generation Model S interior and Model S, design and everything. And like, it was way better than the earlier cars, which I would occasionally get a service loaner. So I know, like, I could see directly, like, how much better it was than the earlier ones. And right now, like, there are very few other automakers that have even remotely mature electric options. And it's, this is probably going to be great in 5 years, maybe. Maybe it might take more than that. I don't know. Hopefully not. But like, in 5 years, this might be a great option. Like when it gets to like its second version or its 1.5-ish kind of version, this could be great. But I would not want to buy somebody's 1.0 in something like a car, which is like, if I buy your car, if I lease your car, whatever, I'm stuck with that car for a number of years. Like that's a major purchase that you're going to be using for a long time. Do you really want to be stuck with somebody's 1.0 of a completely brand new thing they've never done before for that long and for that important of a purchase? I don't think so. So that's something like that. That's going to apply to all of these newcomers. Things like the Porsche Taycan, this thing, pretty much everything that's like an established automaker's first real Tesla competitor. It's so different. Like making an all electric car is so different in so many ways that while I have full faith that they'll be able to do it well a few years in, I don't have that faith for the very first wave because I think they still have a lot to learn, and I don't want to be their beta tester.
I agree with you all in all, but let's not lose sight of the fact that Volvo has been very forward-thinking with regard to a subscription model for cars. And in fact, that's exactly what it says on the Polestar 2 page.
Oh, yeah. Can you explain that to me? Because I read the subscription thing, and it sounds just like a lease.
No. So it's a monthly fee.
Polestar feels that car ownership should be more closely resemble phone ownership, an all-inclusive monthly fee with the option to return or upgrade at the end of your term without any hassle or headache. How is that not a lease?
Because they include insurance as well.
Oh, okay. That's it?
No, I could have sworn there was something else, but I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Maybe that is it. But the idea is that I think with other subscription services, you might be able to change. I don't know if it's Volvo. You might be able to change cars periodically. Didn't BMW do that? They said that you could have different tiers.
You could pick any other of the cars you want, and they don't care which car you have. You just pay them the same monthly fee, and then you just pick. So they make more money from you if you pick a cheaper car, I suppose. I don't know. It's always to just figure out how to get money from people who otherwise wouldn't buy one. But I feel like doesn't sound like it's going to be a good deal. If it's the only way you can buy this car, then tough luck. But I wouldn't choose it.
Yeah, I'm excited though. I'm excited to see all these other manufacturers joining this electric future, which I think we can all agree is probably everyone's future. And I just wanted to reiterate what John said about Volvo lately. I definitely have problems with our XC90, but by and large, I cannot say enough good things about it. And I had no desire to own a Volvo before we bought it. Erin, the car was for Erin, so she basically chose it. And I was supportive of it, not only because, it's her car, but because it seemed like it would be nice. And I really do love this thing. It is not without faults, but I really, really love that XC90. So I agree, John, that Volvo's really been on a tear lately in the best possible way.
I wasn't talking about your Volvo. I was talking about the cars. And that's Marco's problem. Like, he's just ignoring all the SUVs that are coming out because he's not interested in them.
And for the record, this Polestar 2 does look a little bit crossover-y for me. It's a little high.
It is.
It is. I would agree.
The one thing they totally blew in this Polestar is you can just from looking at it, I'm surprised it wasn't mentioned in the Top Gear thing. The giant walls surrounding their center console. What are they thinking? What are they thinking? Like, they could have had an airy feeling interior that feels spacious, like, because you have less stuff that you have to deal with, fewer buttons. The big tablet, it has a lot of the controls on it. And they put these gigantic walls around the center tunnel.
Yeah, that's not great. Although, you did say, Casey, this has CarPlay support, right?
Based on what I saw on Twitter earlier, because I'd asked this question on Twitter earlier, and some people who were very self-assured indicated that it should have CarPlay, yes. But the tablet system apparently, or I shouldn't call it a tablet, but the infotainment system is actually all Google, apparently, and it's running Android and so on. But I'm told from the internet, so it must be true, that it would support CarPlay as well, which is more than I can say for your 2 Teslas that you've owned.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, CarPlay support is tempting. I would actually really enjoy that.
Yeah, and Aaron's, this is not the same setup in Aaron's car, but Aaron's car does have CarPlay, and whether or not you like the Census, as they call it, which is basically their infotainment setup, and that is one of the things that I think is most frustrating about Aaron's car, because particularly startup takes an eternity. But the CarPlay implementation is really solid and really, really good, and so I would hope and assume that it would also be good in this new Polestar. So, in CarPlay, I don't know if it's essential today, although I personally refuse to buy a car without it for future-proofing reasons, but it is really nice. I don't use it that terribly often in my car, usually only if I'm in the car for more than a little bit, or if I'm navigating with my phone, which I don't do that terribly often because I don't go new and exciting places that terribly often. But I really like CarPlay a lot, and I've really been glad that I've had it on the occasions that I do use it.
Can I just say that this configurator website is the worst one I've ever seen in my life. These giant semi-transparent overlays block the view of the car you're trying to configure. It's not obvious how to pick things. Fire the company that made this website.
Yeah, it's not good.
Fire this company. It took me the longest time to figure out how I picked from different options, because it's got the text on top. It's like slightly grayed out. It's just bad. Like, this is not, car configurers are not high technology, and this one has no features that those don't. It's just harder to use. Bad, Volvo. Bad.
Yeah, it took me a good amount of time looking at this, because the first thing you see is the exterior thing, and it defaults to white. And for a good 15 seconds, I'm looking at this thinking, what an amazing control. This car's only coming in white. Like, of course, Casey told me to go look at this and poke through. Like,
how could I not?
Yeah,
oh, well, no, there is an act. There's a, you can close that. I just did it by accident. There's a little close overlay.
Yeah, but then you can't pick things. Like, the advanced technology of car configurators is you have a bunch of choices and you click on them and then you see the picture of the car change, and neither one of those things blocks the other one. That's the technology.
Well, yeah, and I agree. But then you can hit the bread icon. It's not a hamburger because there's no inside.
It's not a hamburger. It's just bread. Chopsticks.
Yeah, it's just bread. But the chopsticks icon. You hit the chopsticks and then it comes back.
And blocks your view again.